The ice water had seeped so deep into Kerra's bones that she could no longer tell where the frozen swamp ended and her own flesh began. She had been standing in this cursed bog for what felt like hours, maybe longer, her legs refusing to obey her commands as the cold turned her muscles to stone. The wound in her side had stopped bleeding at least, though whether that was because it had finally clotted or because her blood had simply frozen, she could not say. Above her, the gray winter sky promised more snow, and she knew with absolute certainty that if night fell before someone found her, she would die here among the dead reeds and black ice. She had tried climbing out 3 times already. Each attempt had left her weaker, more desperate, her fingers too numb to grip the frozen earth at the swamp's edge. The last try had reopened the gash along her ribs, and she had felt the warm trickle of blood mixing with the icy water, before the cold stole even that small heat away. Now she simply stood, waist-deep in the murky water, her breath coming in shallow gasps that turned to white mist in the frigid air. Kerra had always thought she would die in battle. That was the orc way, after all. A warrior's death, surrounded by enemies, her axe singing its final song. She had never imagined she would end like this, alone and freezing, defeated not by blade or arrow, but by her own foolish decision to cross the thorn marsh in winter. Her clan would never even find her body. By spring, the swamp would have claimed her completely, and she would be nothing more than another cautionary tale whispered around the fires. The sound of footsteps crunching through frozen undergrowth made her head snap up, though even that small movement sent waves of exhaustion through her. A human was approaching, tall and broad-shouldered, wrapped in a heavy wool coat the color of dried moss. He carried a walking stick in one hand and a leather satchel across his shoulder, and he was picking his way carefully along the firmer ground that bordered the swamp. She watched him with growing dread, knowing she had no strength left to defend herself if he proved hostile. Their eyes met across the distance. His were a warm brown, startling against his wind-burned face, and she saw the exact moment he registered what she was. The recognition, the flash of fear, the instinctive step backward. She had seen that reaction 1,000 times before. What she had not expected was for him to take a step forward after that initial retreat, his expression shifting from alarm to something that looked almost like concern. "Are you stuck?" he called out, his voice carrying clearly across the frozen wasteland. Kerra nearly laughed at the absurdity of the question, but she had no breath to spare for mockery. Instead, she managed a single nod, watching him carefully for any sign of what he intended to do next. Most humans would leave her here, or worse, would find a bow and put an arrow through her skull while she was helpless. She had given them plenty of reason over the years, riding with the war bands that had raided the borderlands. Her conscience was not clean enough to expect mercy. The human set down his satchel and began testing the ground with his walking stick, moving slowly toward the edge of the swamp nearest to where she stood. He was younger than she had first thought, probably no more than 25 winters, with sandy hair that stuck out from beneath his wool cap in unruly tufts. There was something methodical about the way he moved, careful and deliberate, like a man who had learned to respect the dangers of the wilderness. "How long have you been in there?" he asked, crouching down when he reached a point where the ice-crusted earth met the dark water. "Too long," Kerra managed, her voice hoarse and barely recognizable even to her own ears. Speaking took more effort than she had anticipated, and she felt a wave of dizziness wash over her. The world tilted slightly, and she locked her knees to keep from falling face first into the water. "I'm going to try to pull you out," the human said, unwinding a length of rope from around his waist. "Can you hold on to this if I throw it to you?" Kerra looked down at her hands, which were submerged beneath the murky surface. She could not feel her fingers at all anymore. The honest answer was that she had no idea if she could grip anything, but pride made her nod again. She was not going to tell this human that she was so far gone that even holding a rope might be beyond her capabilities. He threw the rope with practiced accuracy, and it landed within easy reach. Kerra forced her arms to move, commanded her hands to close around the rough hemp. Her fingers refused to cooperate properly, curling with agonizing slowness, but she managed to hook the rope around her wrists instead, letting it tangle in the leather bracers she wore. It would have to be enough. "Ready?" the human called, already bracing himself and wrapping his end of the rope around a sturdy tree trunk that grew at an angle near the swamp's edge. "Yes," she said, though the word came out as barely more than a whisper. The first pull sent shockwaves of pain through her body as her legs tried to move through the resistant water and thick mud below. She bit down on her lower lip hard enough to taste blood, feeling one of her small tusks dig into the soft tissue. The human was strong, she would give him that, and his technique was sound, using the tree as a lever point rather than relying solely on his own strength. But her body was not cooperating, her legs too weak and numb to push effectively, and after several moments of struggle, he had only managed to move her a few inches. He stopped, breathing hard, and looked at her with an expression she could not quite read. "You're going to have to help more than that," he said. "I cannot do this alone." "Trying," Kerra ground out, frustration and shame heating her face despite the cold. She, who had once wrestled a brown bear to the ground during a hunt, who had carried a wounded warrior twice her size off a battlefield, who had never met a physical challenge she could not overcome through sheer stubborn determination. Now, she could not even climb out of a damn swamp. The human studied her for a long moment, then seemed to come to some decision. He secured the rope and began removing his heavy coat, which made no sense whatsoever, until he started unlacing his boots. Surely he was not planning to come in after her. The water was cold enough to kill in minutes. "What are you doing?" she demanded, finding enough alarm to strengthen her voice. "You are too weak to climb out on your own, and I cannot pull you from here," he said matter-of-factly, as if what he was planning was not completely insane. "So I am going to come in and help push you up while I pull. You will freeze to death, human. This water is not natural. There is something wrong with it." The cold here was more than just winter, more than just ice and snow. The thorn marsh had always been a bad place, thick with old magic that twisted and corrupted. The water seemed to drink the warmth from living flesh, eager and hungry. He paused in the act of removing his second boot and looked at her directly. "So will you, if we do not get you out soon. I have dry clothes and fire-making supplies in my pack. If we are quick, we will both survive." The simple logic of it left her with no argument, though every instinct screamed that accepting help from a human would lead to disaster. She had been raised to believe that their kind were treacherous, cruel, that they would smile and offer aid only to plunge a knife between your ribs the moment you turned your back. But what choice did she have? Die here, maintaining her pride, or accept his help and at least have a chance? The human did not wait for her answer. He stepped into the water with a sharp intake of breath that told her exactly how cold it was, and began wading toward her with the rope still secured to the tree behind him. His face went pale almost immediately, his jaw clenching against the cold, but he kept moving until he was close enough to touch her. "I'm going to lift you from behind," he said through chattering teeth. "When I do, you need to try to get your legs under you and push. Can you do that?" "I will try," Kerra said, which was all she could promise. His hands were warm against her sides, even through the soaked leather of her armor, and she felt him testing her weight, finding the best grip. He was careful to avoid the wound on her ribs, she noticed, even though she had not told him about it. Observant, then. That was either very good or very bad, depending on what he chose to do with those observations. "On 3, he said. 1, 2, 3. He lifted with a grunt of effort, and Kerra felt her feet break free from the sucking mud below for the first time in hours. She tried to help, tried to make her legs push, but they responded sluggishly at best. Still, between his lifting and the rope that was now supporting some of her weight, they managed to move her several feet closer to the edge. Her hips scraped against a submerged log, adding a new bruise to her collection, but the pain was distant and unimportant. They repeated the process twice more, the human's breathing growing more labored each time as the cold sapped his strength. Kerra could feel him shaking against her back, feel the tremors that ran through his muscles as hypothermia began to set in. When her hands finally touched solid ground, she wanted to weep with relief, but there was no time for that. The human was in real danger now, his lips turning blue, his movements becoming uncoordinated. With the earth beneath her palms and the rope supporting her weight, Kerra managed to drag herself the last few feet out of the water. She collapsed onto the frozen ground, every muscle screaming, her lungs burning as she tried to catch her breath. Beside her, the human had also made it out, and he was fumbling with his satchel with hands that would barely obey him. "Fire!" he managed to say through violently chattering teeth. "Need to make fire!" Kerra forced herself to move, rolling onto her side and then pushing up to her hands and knees. Her own body was not in much better condition than his, but she had been in the cold longer and had perhaps built up a slight tolerance. More importantly, she had spent years learning to push through pain and exhaustion to function when every sensible part of her brain was screaming to just lie down and rest. She crawled to where his satchel lay and began pulling out its contents with clumsy fingers, flint and steel. Good. A small tin that smelled of rendered fat, excellent fire starter, a bundle of what looked like very dry moss wrapped in oiled cloth. The human knew what he was doing when it came to wilderness survival. She gathered dead wood from the area around them, blessing the fact that the ground here was higher and drier than the swamp, and arranged it as her father had taught her decades ago. Small kindling in the center, larger pieces arranged in a pyramid above it. Her first 3 attempts to strike a spark failed, her hands too numb and shaking too badly to coordinate the movement properly. The human was lying on his side now, curled into himself, his whole body convulsing with shivers. Panic gave her focus, and the 4th strike sent a shower of sparks into the fat-soaked moss. It caught with a whisper of flame that grew quickly as she fed it kindling, then larger sticks, then proper branches. Within minutes, she had a fire burning bright and hot, its warmth like a physical force against her frozen skin. "Come closer," she told the human, who was still several feet away. When he did not respond immediately, she crawled over to him and physically pulled him toward the fire, arranging him so that the heat would reach as much of his body as possible. His eyes were half closed, his breathing shallow, and she recognized the signs of severe cold exposure. She had seen warriors die from less. His pack yielded a wool blanket, which she wrapped around his shoulders, and a second set of clothes, which she knew he needed to put on immediately. The wet garments he wore now would kill him faster than no clothes at all. But he was in no condition to change himself, his hands useless and his coordination gone. Kerra hesitated for only a moment before beginning to remove his wet shirt. This was a level of intimacy that felt wrong on every level, undressing a stranger, a human stranger at that. But the alternative was letting him die after he had risked his life to save hers. That would be a poor repayment indeed. She worked as quickly as her cold, numbed fingers would allow, stripping him of his soaked clothing and dressing him in the dry garments from his pack. He was built solidly, she noticed clinically, with the kind of muscle that came from hard physical labor rather than deliberate training. Scars marked his arms and chest, pale lines against sun-darkened skin, the marks of a life lived close to danger. When he was dressed and wrapped in the blanket as close to the fire as was safe, she turned her attention to herself. Her own clothing was just as wet, just as dangerous, but she had no dry garments to change into. The best she could do was remove her leather armor and outer layers, wringing what water she could from them and arranging them near the fire to dry. She kept her underthings on, thin as they were, because being nearly naked in front of a human male felt like a vulnerability too far, even if he was barely conscious. The fire's heat was starting to reach her core now, and with warmth came pain. Her fingers and toes burned as circulation returned, her wounded side throbbed with renewed vigor, and her muscles ached in ways that promised spectacular bruising tomorrow. But she was alive, and the human was still breathing, and those were victories enough for now. She fed the fire steadily, keeping it burning bright as the winter afternoon faded into evening. The human drifted in and out of awareness, sometimes mumbling things she could not quite make out, other times lying quiet and still beneath his blanket. She checked on him regularly, making sure he was still breathing, that his skin was warming back to a healthy color. As the hours passed and he showed no signs of worsening, she allowed herself to believe that he would survive. Night fell fully, and with it came a fresh bout of snow. Kerra gathered more wood, building up a substantial pile to see them through until morning. She found more supplies in the human's pack: dried meat, hard cheese, a small loaf of dense bread. Her stomach cramped with hunger at the sight, reminding her that she had not eaten in over a day, but these were his provisions, not hers. She had no right to them. As if sensing her thoughts, the human stirred and opened his eyes. They were clearer now, more focused, though he still looked exhausted and cold. He took in his surroundings slowly, his gaze moving from the fire to her and back again, and she saw the moment full awareness returned. "We made it," he said, his voice rough but stronger than before. "You nearly did not," Kerra replied. "That was foolish what you did. You could have died." "So could you." He pushed himself up to a sitting position with visible effort, keeping the blanket wrapped around his shoulders. Seemed wrong to leave you there. I'm an orc, she said flatly, watching for his reaction. Most humans would have celebrated finding me helpless. Some would have made sure I did not escape. He was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful in the firelight. Most orcs would not have built a fire to save a human from freezing to death, he said finally. I suppose we are both making unusual choices today. The observation was fair enough that she could not argue with it. She had indeed broken every rule of her upbringing by helping him, and if her clan ever learned of it, there would be consequences. Orcs who showed weakness toward humans were cast out, branded as traitors to their kind. But that was a problem for another day, assuming she survived long enough for it to matter. There is food in my pack, the human continued. You should eat something. You look half dead. I have no coin to pay you, Kerra said stiffly. I did not ask for payment. He reached for the pack himself, moving slowly and carefully, and pulled out the wrapped food. He tore the bread in half, did the same with the cheese, and held the portions out to her. We both need to eat. No sense in either of us starving out of pride. Kerra took the offered food after a moment's hesitation, and the first bite tasted better than anything she could remember. She had to force herself to eat slowly, to not wolf it down like the starving creature she was, and the human did her the courtesy of not watching her too closely as she ate. They finished the modest meal in silence, and when it was done, he pulled out a water skin and offered that as well. What is your name? He asked as she drank. She considered lying or refusing to answer, but both seemed churlish after everything that had happened. Kerra of the Stonefist clan, or I was before I left. Left or were exiled, he asked, and there was no judgment in the question, only curiosity. Left, she said firmly. I chose to leave. He nodded as if that made perfect sense. I'm Liam Yates. I have a homestead about 2 miles northeast of here. Small farm, nothing fancy. But there is a roof and walls and a proper bed. You are welcome to shelter there until you have recovered enough to travel. The offer stunned her into silence. Humans did not invite orcs into their homes. They did not offer shelter and care to those they considered monsters and enemies. She searched his face for signs of deception, some hidden trap or cruel joke, but found only genuine concern and bone-deep weariness. Why would you do that? She demanded. You know what I am. You know what my kind has done to your people. I know what some orcs have done, Liam corrected gently, just like I know what some humans have done to orcs. But I also know that you are injured and freezing, and that the Thorn Marsh is no place to spend the winter. Beyond that, you saved my life tonight. Seems only right to return the favor. I needed you alive to keep the fire going, Kerra said, which was partially true if deeply misleading about her actual motivations. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Whatever helps you sleep at night, he said. The offer stands regardless. You can accept it or not, but I would feel better if you did. Kerra wanted to refuse on principle, to maintain her independence and pride, but her body had other ideas. She was still dangerously cold, wounded, and exhausted beyond measure. Traveling anywhere in this condition would likely kill her, and she had not survived the swamp only to die of exposure on the frozen ground. If Liam Yates wanted to offer her shelter, she would be a fool not to take it, at least until she was strong enough to continue her journey. One night, she said finally. Maybe 2 if the wound needs more time to close. Then I will leave. Fair enough, Liam agreed. We should try to get some rest. We will need our strength to make the walk tomorrow. He lay back down near the fire, adjusting the blanket around himself, and within minutes his breathing had evened out into the rhythm of sleep. Kerra remained sitting, keeping watch over the fire and the darkness beyond its circle of light. She told herself it was practical, that someone needed to tend the flames and watch for predators, but the truth was that she felt too vulnerable to sleep. Every instinct screamed that trusting a human was a mistake, that she should leave now while he slept, wound and cold be damned. But she was so tired, and the fire was warm, and despite everything, Liam Yates had given her no reason to fear him. Perhaps, she thought as her eyes grew heavy, perhaps this one human was different. Perhaps just this once she could afford to trust. She woke to pale dawn light and the smell of something cooking. Liam was awake and moving around the campsite with more energy than she would have expected, and he had rigged a simple spit over the fire where several small fish were roasting. He noticed her stirring and offered a cautious smile. "Good morning," he said. "How are you feeling?" Kerra took inventory of her body before answering. cold, still, and sore, but the bone-deep chill from yesterday had receded to something more manageable. Her wounded side was stiff and painful, but when she carefully probed it with her fingers, she found that the bleeding had stopped completely and there was no heat that might suggest infection. All things considered, she felt remarkably better than she had any right to expect. "I will live," she said, which seemed to amuse him for reasons she did not entirely understand. "High praise," he said. "The fish should be ready soon. After we eat, we can head to my homestead if you are up for the walk. 2 miles is not far, but the terrain is rough in places." "I can manage 2 miles," Kerra said, though she was not entirely certain that was true. Still, she had walked farther on worse injuries, and pride would carry her the rest of the way if strength failed. The fish was good, simply prepared, but fresh and filling. As they ate, Liam explained that he had set a line in a nearby stream the night before, a habit from years of wilderness travel. He had clearly spent considerable time in the backcountry, knew its rhythms and dangers in the way that only experience could teach. Kerra found herself curious about him despite her better judgment, wondering what had brought a young human to carve out a life alone on the frontier. They packed up the camp efficiently, Liam gathering his belongings while Kerra strapped her dried leather armor back onto her body. It was stiff and would need proper oiling later, but it would serve. Her weapons were gone, lost in the swamp, or perhaps discarded before she had even entered it. She could not quite remember. Being unarmed made her nervous, but there was nothing to be done about it now. The walk to Liam's homestead was every bit as difficult as she had feared. The terrain was indeed rough, full of hidden roots and patches of ice that threatened to send her sprawling. Her legs protested every step, muscles still weak from the previous day's ordeal, and the wound in her side sent sharp pains through her torso whenever she moved wrong. But she gritted her teeth and kept pace with Liam, refusing to show weakness or ask for help. He, to his credit, did not comment on her obvious struggle, though he did set a moderate pace and chose the easiest paths through the underbrush. When they came to a half-frozen stream that needed crossing, he went first, and then offered his hand to help her over the slippery rocks. She took it without comment, pragmatism winning out over pride, and his grip was warm and steady as he helped her navigate the treacherous crossing. The homestead appeared as they crested a low ridge, and Kerra felt a small surge of relief at the sight. It was modest as Liam had promised, just a single-room cabin with a small barn and a few outbuildings, surrounded by fields that lay dormant under their blanket of snow. But the construction looked solid, the roof well thatched, and smoke rose from the stone chimney in a welcoming gray column. As they approached, a large dog emerged from the barn, barking a warning that cut off abruptly when it saw Liam. The animal bounded over, tail wagging furiously, and circled its master with obvious joy. Then it caught sight of Kerra and froze, hackles rising, a low growl rumbling in its chest. "Easy, Bear," Liam said, placing a calming hand on the dog's head. "She is a friend. Be nice." The dog named Bear did not look convinced, but it stopped growling and settled for watching Kerra with deep suspicion. She kept her movements slow and non-threatening, understanding that the animal was simply protecting its territory. Given her size and obvious strength, she could not blame it for being wary. Inside, the cabin was exactly what she had expected: simple, functional, and surprisingly clean. A large bed occupied one corner, a stone hearth dominated another, and a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs sat in the center of the room. Shelves lined the walls, holding supplies and tools and a few personal items. It was the home of someone who lived alone and liked it that way, everything arranged for one person's convenience. It is not much," Liam said, sounding almost apologetic, "but it is warm and dry. You can take the bed. I will make up a pallet by the fire." "I will not take your bed," Kerra protested immediately. "I can sleep on the floor." "You are injured and recovering from hypothermia," Liam said firmly. "You need proper rest. I have slept on worse than a floor by a warm fire, trust me." They argued about it for several more minutes, neither willing to concede, until finally Liam proposed a compromise. They would both sleep in proper bedding, and he would rig a curtain down the middle of the room to provide privacy. It was a reasonable solution, and Kerra accepted it with as much grace as she could muster. The rest of the day passed in quiet domesticity that felt deeply strange to Kerra. Liam showed her where things were stored, explained his routines for tending the animals and maintaining the homestead, and generally treated her presence as if it were the most natural thing in the world. He cleaned and bandaged the wound on her side with gentle competence, and though she tensed at his touch, he gave her no reason to fear. The gash was ugly, but not deep, and he assured her it would heal cleanly if she kept it clean and did not strain herself too much. That evening, he made a stew from vegetables stored in his root cellar and more of the dried meat from his pack. They ate together at his small table, and the normality of it all was deeply unsettling. Kerra kept waiting for the trap to spring, for his kindness to reveal itself as manipulation or cruelty in disguise, but it never came. He simply treated her with the same courtesy he might have shown any guest, asking polite questions about her journey and sharing stories of his own life on the frontier. She learned that he had been a soldier once, fighting in the border wars that had raged between human kingdoms to the south. He had seen too much death, too much pointless violence over land and pride and old grudges, and when his service was done, he had taken his pay and come north to build something rather than destroy. The homestead was 3 years in the making, carved from wilderness through backbreaking labor, and he was proud of it in a quiet, unassuming way. Kerra found herself sharing more than she had intended in return. She told him about leaving her clan, though not all the reasons why. She spoke of her desire to find somewhere she could simply exist without the constant pressure to raid, to fight, to prove her strength and worth through violence. She had been raised as a warrior, trained from childhood to kill humans, but somewhere along the way, she had grown tired of it all. Tired of the blood, the screaming, the sight of villages burning. Tired of being a monster. "You are not a monster," Liam said quietly when she finished. "Monsters do not question what they do. They do not walk away from everything they know to try to find a better way." "Your people would call me one if they knew what I have done," Kerra said bitterly. "I have killed humans, Liam, raided their homes. I'm not innocent in this." "Neither am I," he replied, meeting her eyes across the table. "I have killed orcs. Probably some from your clan, given where I fought. We were all following orders, all doing what we thought was right or necessary, or just what we had to do to survive. Does that make us monsters, or just people caught in something larger than ourselves?" Kerra had no answer for that, and they lapsed into silence. But it was a comfortable silence, thoughtful rather than tense, and when they finally retired for the night, she felt more at peace than she had in months. The days that followed fell into an easy rhythm. Kerra's body healed slowly but steadily, the wound closing clean just as Liam had predicted, her strength returning as proper food and rest worked their restorative magic. She made herself useful around the homestead, unable to simply lie idle while Liam worked. She hauled water, chopped wood, tended the animals, and helped with the 100 small tasks that came with maintaining a frontier farm in winter. Liam accepted her help without fuss, working alongside her and treating her as an equal partner rather than an invalid or a guest. They fell into patterns together, learning each other's rhythms and preferences without needing to discuss them explicitly. She discovered that he was an early riser who liked his mornings quiet, so she took to sitting outside with Bear while he had his first cup of tea in peace. He learned that she had a tendency to push herself too hard, so he started calling regular breaks and insisting she rest her healing side. The dog gradually warmed to her, won over by consistent kindness and the scraps she slipped him when Liam was not looking. Bear began following her around the homestead, his massive head bumping against her hand in request for pets, and she found she enjoyed the simple companionship. Animals did not care that she was an orc. They judged on character and action, nothing more. 2 weeks passed, then 3, and Kerra found excuses to stay. The wound needed more time. The weather was too harsh for travel. She should help Liam prepare for the worst of winter before she left. It was only fair given his hospitality. He never questioned her excuses, never pushed her to leave, and she began to suspect he was making his own excuses for why she should remain. It was during the 4th week, while they were working together to repair a section of the barn roof that had been damaged by heavy snow, that Kerra realized she had stopped thinking about leaving at all. This homestead had become familiar, comfortable, a place where she could simply be Kerra rather than Kerra of the Stonefist clan, or Kerra the Orc Warrior, or any of the other labels that had defined her life. Here, she was just herself, and that was enough. The realization terrified her. She climbed down from the roof too quickly, jarring her side and making her wince, and when Liam asked if she was all right, she snapped at him in frustration and confusion. He backed off immediately, giving her space, and she fled to the barn where she could be alone with her churning thoughts. This was not supposed to happen. She was not supposed to grow comfortable here, was not supposed to start thinking of this place as home. Liam was a human, and humans could not be trusted, and the fact that he had been nothing but kind to her did not change generations of enmity between their peoples. If she stayed, if she let herself believe this could be permanent, she was setting herself up for inevitable heartbreak when reality reasserted itself. But even as she listed all the logical reasons why she should leave, her heart rebelled against them. She did not want to go back to wandering, rootless and alone. She did not want to leave this place that had given her peace, or the man who had shown her a kindness she had never expected to find. She was still wrestling with herself when Liam appeared in the barn doorway, moving quietly but not trying to hide his approach. He leaned against the frame, his expression gentle and patient, and waited for her to acknowledge him. "I'm sorry I snapped at you," Kerra said finally, the words coming hard. "You are forgiven," Liam said simply. "Do you want to talk about what upset you?" "No," she said, then reconsidered. "Maybe. I do not know." He came into the barn properly and sat on a bale of hay, leaving space between them, but making it clear he was willing to listen if she wanted to speak. The openness of the gesture made something in her chest ache. "I have been here almost a month," Kerra said slowly. "That is longer than I intended to stay." "You are welcome to stay longer," Liam said. "You are welcome to stay as long as you want, actually. I know I said that at the beginning, but I mean it even more now. You have been good company, Kerra, and a real help with the homestead. I would be sorry to see you go." "This cannot work," she said, forcing the words out past the tightness in her throat. "You know it cannot. I am an orc. You are human. Our peoples are at war, have been at war for as long as anyone can remember. There is no future where this does not end badly." "The war is far from here," Liam said quietly. "I left it behind when I came north, and so did you. What does it matter what our peoples are doing to each other hundreds of miles away? Here, in this place, it is just you and me." "You cannot be that naive," Kerra said, frustration bleeding into her voice. "The war will come here eventually. Soldiers, raiding parties, refugees fleeing violence. Someone will find me here and word will spread. And then what? Will your neighbors accept that you are sheltering an orc? Will they believe you are not a traitor or a collaborator?" "I have no neighbors," Liam pointed out. "The nearest farm is 10 miles south, and I see them perhaps twice a year when I go to the trading post. No one comes out here except by accident or because they are lost." "That could change." "It could," he agreed. "And if it does, we will deal with it then. But I'm not going to let fear of what might happen stop me from choosing what I want now." The certainty in his voice made her look at him sharply. "What do you want, Liam?" He met her gaze steadily, no hesitation or doubt in his expression. "I want you to stay, not as a guest, not as someone passing through, but as a permanent part of this place, as my partner, if you will have me." The words hung in the air between them, impossible and tempting in equal measure. Kerra's heart was racing, her palms suddenly damp despite the cold. This was madness. This was everything she had told herself she could not have. "You barely know me," she protested weakly. "I know that you are brave enough to walk away from everything familiar in search of something better," Liam said. "I know that you work hard, that you are kind to animals, that you have a good sense of humor even if you try to hide it. I know that you saved my life and I saved yours, and that we have built something good here in the weeks since. What else do I need to know?" "You need to know that I have killed people who looked like you," Kerra said harshly, needing him to understand the full weight of what he was offering. "You need to know that I have done terrible things in service to my clan, that I have blood on my hands that will never wash clean. You need to know that I do not know how to be anything other than a warrior, and I'm terrified that one day you will look at me and see the monster everyone else sees." Liam was quiet for a long moment, absorbing her words. When he spoke, his voice was gentle but firm. "I need to know that you are trying to be better than what you were made to be. I need to know that you chose to leave that life behind, even though it cost you everything. I need to know that the person I have spent these weeks with, The person who laughs at Bear's antics and works herself too hard and argues with me about who should take the bed is real. And she is, Kerra. That is who you are now, regardless of who you used to be." Tears were burning at the corners of her eyes, and Kerra blinked them back furiously. Orcs did not cry. Warriors did not cry. But apparently she was neither of those things anymore, because the tears came anyway, hot tracks down her cold cheeks. Liam crossed the distance between them and very carefully pulled her into an embrace. She stiffened at first, unused to such casual physical affection, but his arms were warm and steady around her, and after a moment she let herself lean into the contact. He was solid and real, and he was offering her something she had never let herself hope for: acceptance, belonging, home. "I am afraid," she whispered against his shoulder. "So am I," he admitted, "but I would rather be afraid and have you here than safe and alone." They stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the dim barn while Bear watched from his corner with what could only be described as approval. When they finally pulled apart, Kerra felt lighter somehow, as if confessing her fears had lessened their weight. "I will stay," she said, the words feeling like a leap off a cliff into unknown waters. "I do not know if this will work, but I want to try." The smile that spread across Liam's face was brighter than the winter sun, and he took her hands in his, squeezing gently. "That is all I am asking. We will figure out the rest as we go." Winter deepened into its harshest months, and Kerra learned what it meant to build a life with someone rather than simply exist alongside them. She and Liam worked together to keep the homestead functioning through the brutal cold and heavy snows, their partnership growing stronger with each challenge they overcame. They learned to communicate without words, anticipating each other's needs and movements with the kind of synchronicity that came from shared purpose and growing affection. The feelings between them evolved gradually, deepening from friendship into something more profound. Kerra found herself noticing things about Liam that had nothing to do with survival or practicality: the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the sound of his laugh, the careful gentleness of his hands when he worked with the animals. She caught herself watching him when she should have been focused on other tasks, and the warmth that spread through her chest when he smiled at her had nothing to do with the fire. Liam, for his part, made his growing affection clear through 1,000 small gestures. He learned how she liked her tea, saved the best portions of meals for her, made sure her side of the divided cabin was always warmest. He listened when she talked about her past without judgment, shared his own history with equal honesty, and treated her opinions and ideas with genuine respect. He made her feel valued in a way she had never experienced before. The first time he kissed her, it was during an evening when they had been sitting by the fire, talking about their plans for the homestead come spring. He had been describing the garden he wanted to plant, his face animated with enthusiasm, and she had been watching him with such obvious fondness that he had trailed off mid-sentence. "What?" he had asked, smiling. "Nothing," she had said. "I just like listening to you talk about the future." He had leaned across the space between their chairs and kissed her then, soft and questioning, giving her every chance to pull away. But she had not pulled away. Instead, she had kissed him back, her hand coming up to cup his jaw, feeling the rasp of his evening stubble against her palm. It had been sweet and gentle, and everything she had not known she wanted. After that, the physical affection between them grew naturally. They held hands while walking through the snow-covered fields, stole kisses while working side by side, fell asleep in each other's arms more often than not. Kerra had been nervous at first about the physical differences between them, about whether Liam would find her orc features strange or off-putting, but he seemed to find her beautiful exactly as she was. He traced the line of her tusks with gentle fingers, pressed kisses to her pointed ears, told her that her green skin reminded him of spring leaves and new growth. She, in turn, learned his body with reverent attention, mapping scars and learning what touches made him sigh with pleasure. Their lovemaking was tender and exploratory, two people learning each other's rhythms and desires without rush or expectation. Afterward, they would lie tangled together in the warmth of the bed, talking quietly about everything and nothing, and Kerra would think that this was happiness. But happiness, she was learning, did not mean the absence of fear or doubt. As winter began its slow retreat and the first signs of spring appeared, Kerra found herself growing anxious about the future. Winter had cocooned them in isolation, made it easy to pretend that the outside world did not exist, but spring would bring thaw and travel and the possibility of discovery. What would happen when someone inevitably stumbled across the homestead and saw her here? Liam seemed to sense her growing unease, and one evening in early spring, he brought up the subject directly. They were sitting outside watching the sunset, paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, the air still cold but carrying the promise of warmer days ahead. "We should talk about what happens next," he said without preamble. "What do you mean?" Kerra asked, though she knew exactly what he meant. "I mean that spring is coming, and with it the possibility that we will not be as isolated as we have been. I want to know what you want to do. Do you want to hide when traders come by? Do you want to be introduced as my partner? Do you want to leave before anyone sees you?" The questions were practical and necessary, but they still made her chest tight with anxiety. "What do you want?" she asked instead of answering. "I want to live my life openly with the person I love," Liam said simply. "I do not want to hide you or pretend you are not here, but I also know that could bring trouble, and I will not make that choice for both of us without your agreement." "You love me," Kerra said, her voice barely above a whisper, latching onto those words and ignoring the rest for the moment. Liam turned to look at her fully, his expression open and honest. "Yes, I love you. I have for a while now, I think. I did not say anything because I was not sure if you felt the same, but since we are talking about the future, you should know where I stand." "Oh, I love you too," Kerra said, the admission feeling like both a relief and a terror. "I did not think I could. I did not think I was allowed to love a human, or that a human could love me. But I do. I love you." He kissed her then, deep and thorough, his hands framing her face like she was something precious. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "Then we will face whatever comes together," he said firmly. "If people have a problem with us being together, that is their problem, not ours. I will not give you up because of other people's prejudice or fear." "It could be dangerous," Kerra warned, "for both of us, but especially for you. Humans who consort with orcs are considered traitors by many." "Let them consider me what they want," Liam said with a shrug. "I have been called worse things. What matters is what we are to each other, not what anyone else thinks." His confidence was both admirable and frustrating, born of a privilege he did not fully recognize. Humans who broke from their societies could often find a way back, earn forgiveness, or simply move somewhere their past was unknown. Orcs had no such luxury. An orc who betrayed their clan was outcast forever, marked for death if they ever returned. But she did not say this because she knew Liam understood on some level, and because arguing about it would not change anything. "Then we stay," she said, making the decision firmly. "We stay here, and we build our life, and we deal with problems as they come. Together." "Together," Liam agreed, sealing the promise with another kiss. The first test came sooner than either of them expected. Not quite 3 weeks later, a human trader arrived at the homestead, leading a pack mule loaded with goods and looking for a place to camp for the night. Liam went out to greet him, while Kerra remained in the cabin, watching through the window with her heart in her throat. She saw Liam speak with the trader, saw the man's easy smile and relaxed posture. They seemed to know each other, at least casually, and she watched as Liam gestured toward the barn, clearly offering shelter for the night. The trader nodded gratefully and began leading his mule that direction. Then Liam turned toward the cabin and called out, "Kerra, can you come help me with the evening chores? We have a guest for dinner." It was a deliberate choice, an announcement and an invitation all at once. Kerra took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and walked out of the cabin into full view of the trader. The man froze when he saw her, his hand instinctively moving to the knife at his belt. His eyes went wide, tracking over her green skin, her tusks, her obvious orc heritage, and then darting to Liam in confusion and alarm. "This is Kerra," Liam said calmly, as if introducing an orc to a human trader was the most normal thing in the world. "She is my partner. Kerra, this is Marcus Thorne. He makes the trading circuit through the northern homesteads a few times a year." Marcus looked between them, clearly struggling to process this information. "Your partner," he repeated slowly. "Yes," Liam said firmly. "Is that going to be a problem?" There was steel in the question, a quiet warning that the answer mattered. Marcus seemed to recognize this, and after a long moment he deliberately moved his hand away from his knife and forced a smile that did not quite reach his eyes. "No problem," he said, though his discomfort was obvious. "I have seen stranger things on the frontier, I suppose." The evening was awkward, the conversation stilted, Marcus clearly unsure how to behave around Kerra and defaulting to mostly ignoring her presence. He spoke with Liam about trade goods and news from the settlements to the south, about weather and crops and all the mundane topics that comprised life on the frontier. Kerra remained quiet, helping to prepare the meal and serving it without comment, letting Liam take the lead in the interaction. When Marcus finally retired to the barn for the night, Liam and Kerra cleaned up in tense silence. Only when they were sure the trader was out of earshot did Liam speak. "That could have gone worse," he said, trying for optimism. "He will talk," Kerra said flatly. "By this time next month, every homestead and settlement within 100 miles will know that Liam Yates is living with an orc." "Let them know," Liam said, pulling her into his arms. "Let the whole world know if they want. It changes nothing about how I feel or what we are building here." Kerra wanted to share his confidence, but fear gnawed at her gut. She had seen what happened when humans and orcs tried to bridge the divide between their peoples. It always ended in blood and tragedy. But she also knew that backing down now, hiding what she was and what they meant to each other, would only delay the inevitable confrontation. Better to face it head on than to live in constant fear of discovery. Marcus left early the next morning, clearly eager to be on his way. He was polite enough in his goodbyes, but there was a lingering discomfort in how he avoided looking directly at Kerra. She watched him disappear down the trail and tried not to think about all the ways this could come back to haunt them. Spring progressed into early summer, and life on the homestead continued its rhythms. Liam and Kerra planted the garden he had dreamed of during winter, long rows of vegetables and herbs that would sustain them through the next cold season. They repaired fences, tended the animals, made improvements to the barn and cabin. They worked hard during the day and fell into each other's arms at night, building a partnership that felt more solid with each passing week. News of their relationship did spread, just as Kerra had predicted. The next traders who came through were less surprised to see her, which meant they had heard stories. Some were hostile, refusing to do business with Liam and leaving quickly. Others were merely wary, willing to trade, but clearly uncomfortable. A very few seemed genuinely unbothered, treating Kerra with the same courtesy they showed Liam. It was one of these more accepting traders, a weathered old woman named Sarah Thatcher, who brought them a warning in midsummer. "There has been talk in the settlements," she said bluntly, accepting a cup of tea from Kerra with a nod of thanks. "Some folks are saying that having an orc this far into human territory is dangerous. There's talk of forming a group to come out here and drive her away." "They are welcome to try," Liam said, his voice hard in a way Kerra rarely heard. "This is my land, and Kerra has every right to be here." "I'm just telling you what I have heard," Sarah said, holding up her hands. "Personally, I do not care who you share your bed with, but you should know that trouble might be coming." After Sarah left, Kerra and Liam had a long discussion about what to do. The sensible thing would be for Kerra to leave, at least temporarily, to let tensions cool. But Kerra refused to run, and Liam refused to let her go, so instead, they prepared. They stockpiled supplies, reinforced the cabin's defenses, and made plans for how to handle a confrontation if one came. The group arrived on a hot afternoon in late summer, 8 men on horseback, armed with swords and bows. Liam and Kerra saw them coming from a distance and met them in the yard, standing side by side. The leader was a thick-set man with a gray beard, his face weathered from years of sun and wind. He looked at Kerra with undisguised disgust before turning his attention to Liam. "Liam Yates," he said, his tone formal and cold. "I am Owen Reeves, and I speak for the settlements to the south. We have come to inform you that harboring an orc is not acceptable. She must leave, or we will remove her by force." "She is not going anywhere," Liam said calmly. "This is my land, my home, and Kerra is my partner. You have no authority here." "We have the authority of people who will not stand by while an orc takes root in our territory," Owen shot back. "These creatures have killed our families, burned our homes. We will not tolerate them living among us." "Kerra has done none of those things," Liam said. She left her clan specifically because she wanted no part of that violence. She has been here for months and has harmed no one. Your issue is with what she is, not with anything she has actually done. What she is enough, another man in the group said harshly. Orcs cannot be trusted. Today she plays at being peaceful. Tomorrow she will slit your throat and steal everything you have. Kerra had remained silent through the exchange, but she could not let that stand. I have had months to kill Liam if that was my intent, she said, her voice carrying clearly across the yard. I have slept beside him, cooked with him, worked alongside him. If I wanted him dead, he would be. The fact that he lives and thrives should tell you something about my actual intentions. It tells me you are playing a long game, Owen said, earning his trust so you can betray him more thoroughly. Or it tells you that you are wrong about me, Kerra countered, that perhaps orcs are more than the monsters you have made us out to be. We did not make you monsters, one of the other men spat. You did that yourselves with your raiding and killing. And humans have never raided or killed, Kerra shot back. I have seen human armies burn orc villages, slaughter families. Take children as slaves. Both our peoples have done terrible things to each other. But I am trying to break that cycle. Why can you not see that? Because you are an orc, Owen said flatly, and that is all you will ever be. The conversation was going nowhere, and Kerra could feel the tension ratcheting higher with each exchange. These men had not come here to be reasoned with. They had come expecting violence, perhaps even hoping for it, and they would not leave satisfied without it. Liam must have sensed the same thing, because he stepped slightly forward, putting himself more directly between Kerra and the armed men. You need to leave, he said, his voice low and dangerous. Now, before this turns into something none of us want. We are not leaving without the orc, Owen said. One way or another, she is coming with us. Then you are not leaving, Liam said simply, and there was such certainty in his voice that several of the men shifted uneasily in their saddles. For a long moment, the two groups faced each other in tense silence. Kerra was acutely aware that she and Liam were outnumbered and outarmed. If this came to violence, their chances were not good, but she also knew that neither of them would back down, not from this, not when everything they had built together hung in the balance. It was Sarah Thatcher who broke the stalemate, riding up the trail on her old gray mare with an expression of profound annoyance on her weathered face. What in blazes do you fools think you are doing? She demanded, reining in beside Owen's group. This is not your concern, Sarah, Owen said. The hell it is not, she shot back. I have been trading with Liam Yates for 3 years, and I will not stand by while you idiots start trouble on his land. That orc has done nothing to warrant this. She is an orc, Owen repeated, as if that explained everything. Idida, and I am an old woman who has fought in 2 wars and buried 3 husbands, Sarah said sharply. We are all lots of things, Owen. What matters is what we choose to do with what we are. That girl has chosen peace. Can you say the same? Her words seemed to give some of the men pause. Sarah had a reputation in the settlements, respected for her years and her wisdom, and her defense of Kerra carried weight that Liam's words alone could not match. The settlements will not accept this, Owen said, but there was less certainty in his voice now. Then the settlements can stay away from Liam's homestead, Sarah said. He is not bothering anyone, and neither is his woman. If you have a problem with how they choose to live, that is your burden to carry, not theirs. The standoff continued for several more minutes, but the energy had shifted. The men were no longer unified in their purpose, doubt creeping into their expressions. Finally, Owen spat into the dirt and turned his horse away. This is not over, he warned. Yes, it is, Sarah said firmly. Go home, Owen. Find something better to do with your time than harassing young couples trying to build a life. The group left, some with clear reluctance, others seeming almost relieved to have an excuse to back down. Kerra and Liam stood together, watching until they disappeared from sight, neither quite willing to believe the danger had passed. Thank you, Liam said to Sarah, genuine gratitude in his voice. Do not thank me yet, Sarah said. I bought you time, nothing more. There will be others who feel the same as Owen, and not all of them will be as easy to turn aside. You two need to decide if this life is worth the trouble it is going to bring. It is, Kerra and Liam said together, then looked at each other and smiled despite the tension. Sarah shook her head, but there was affection in the gesture. Young love, she muttered, makes people do damn fool things. Well, if you are determined to stick it out, you had better be prepared to defend yourselves. I will spread the word that you are under my protection, such as it is, but that will only go so far." She left shortly after, leaving Liam and Kerra alone to process what had just happened. They went inside the cabin and held each other for a long time, not speaking, just taking comfort in the fact that they had survived another challenge. "We cannot keep doing this," Kerra said eventually, "living in constant fear of the next group that decides to take issue with us." "What are you suggesting?" Liam asked carefully. "I am suggesting that we need allies," Kerra said. "We need people who will stand with us, who will help defend our right to be together. Sarah is a start, but one old woman is not enough." "Where do we find such people?" Liam asked. "Most humans hate orcs, and most orcs hate humans. The number of people who would be willing to bridge that divide is vanishingly small." "Then we start small," Kerra said. "We prove that it can be done. We show people that humans and orcs can live together peacefully, that we can build something good together. And maybe, slowly, we change some minds." It was an ambitious plan, perhaps an impossible one, but Liam found himself nodding. They had already accomplished the impossible simply by making their relationship work. Perhaps they could push a little further, change a few more hearts and minds. Over the following months, they made a conscious effort to be more visible, to engage with the traders and travelers who passed through. Kerra made sure to be present and helpful, demonstrating through action that she was no threat. Liam spoke openly about their relationship, refusing to hide or downplay it, making it clear that this was a permanent arrangement, not some temporary madness. Slowly, painfully slowly, attitudes began to shift. Some people remained hostile, but others started to come around. They saw how hard Kerra worked, how devoted she and Liam were to each other, how peaceful and productive their homestead had become. A few even began to actively defend them when others spoke against the relationship. The real turning point came in early winter, when a group of orc raiders attacked a settlement about 15 miles south. The raid was brutal and destructive, leaving several people dead and many more injured. In the aftermath, rage against orcs reached a fever pitch, and Kerra knew that trouble was coming. It arrived in the form of a much larger group than before, nearly 20 armed men and women, demanding that Kerra be turned over to face justice for the crimes of her people. Liam refused, as Kerra had known he would, and the confrontation turned violent. The fight was sharp and vicious. Liam was a skilled fighter from his military days, and Kerra was a trained warrior despite having left that life behind. Together, they held the cabin against the attackers, using the defensive preparations they had made and fighting with desperate determination. But they were outnumbered, and eventually one of the attackers managed to put an arrow through Liam's shoulder, sending him crashing to the ground. Kerra saw him fall and felt something inside her break. All her carefully maintained peace, all her efforts to leave violence behind, shattered in an instant. She roared her fury and threw herself into the battle with the full force of her warrior training, no longer fighting defensively, but attacking with brutal efficiency. She broke bones, sent people fleeing in terror, and stood over Liam's fallen body like an avenging spirit. The attackers broke and ran, unwilling to face her unleashed rage, and in the sudden silence that followed, Kerra collapsed beside Liam. He was conscious but pale, blood soaking his shirt, and the fear in her heart was greater than anything she had felt in battle. "You are not allowed to die," she told him fiercely, already working to staunch the bleeding. "Do you hear me, Liam Yates? You're not allowed to leave me." "Not planning on it," he managed through gritted teeth, "but you might want to get that arrow out first." She did, working with steady hands despite her terror, using the medical knowledge he had taught her over the months to treat the wound as best she could. The arrow had gone clean through, missing anything vital, and while it would take time to heal, he would survive. It was Sarah who found them several hours later, Kerra still holding pressure on the bandaged wound, Liam drifting in and out of consciousness. She had brought others with her, people from the settlements who had been horrified by the attack on the homestead. "We came as soon as we heard," Sarah said, kneeling beside them. "Some of us have been trying to stop this madness, but there is so much anger after the raid." "He needs proper medical care," Kerra said, her voice raw. "I have done what I can, but it is not enough." Between them, they got Liam to the nearest settlement that had a healer, a risky journey, but a necessary one. The healer was an older man who looked at Kerra with suspicion, but treated Liam with skilled competence. The wound was cleaned and stitched properly, herbs applied to prevent infection, and Liam was installed in a bed to rest and recover. Kerra stayed by his side the entire time, refusing to leave despite the hostile looks from some of the settlement's residents. Sarah ran interference, making it clear that Kerra was under her protection and that anyone who had a problem with that would have to go through her first. It was enough to keep the peace, if barely. Liam recovered slowly over the next few weeks, his natural strength and constitution serving him well. During that time, something shifted in the settlement. People saw how devoted Kerra was to him, how she never left his side, how gentle she was in caring for him, despite her obvious capacity for violence. They saw that the orc who had fought so fiercely had done so not out of bloodlust but out of love, defending the person who mattered most to her. By the time Liam was well enough to travel back to the homestead, attitudes had changed significantly. The settlement's leadership issued a formal apology for the attack and promised that such action would not be sanctioned again. It was not universal acceptance, but it was a start, an acknowledgement that perhaps the situation was more complex than simple orc versus human. Back at the homestead, Liam and Kerra settled into recovery and rebuilding. The cabin had been damaged in the fight, and there was much work to be done to restore it. But they tackled it together, as they had tackled everything else, and slowly their home took shape again. On a clear spring evening, nearly 2 years after Liam had first found Kerra in the frozen swamp, he asked her to marry him. They were sitting outside watching the sunset, the garden beginning to show its first green shoots, and he simply took her hand and said the words. "Marry me," he said. "I know it will not be recognized by law or church, but I do not care. I want to make a formal commitment to you, to bind our lives together as permanently as we can. Will you marry me, Kerra?" She said yes through happy tears, and they sealed the promise with a kiss that tasted of future and hope. The wedding itself was a small affair, held at the homestead with Sarah as witness and a wandering priest who was willing to perform the ceremony despite its unconventional nature. Kerra wore a simple dress in deep green, and Liam wore his best clothes, and they spoke vows of love and commitment that came straight from the heart. "I vow to stand beside you through whatever comes," Liam said, holding her hands, "to love you not despite what you are, but because of all that you are, to build a life with you that honors both our peoples and transcends the hatred that has divided them." "I vow to build a life of peace with you," Kerra said, her voice strong and clear, "to leave behind the warrior I was and embrace the partner I am becoming, to love you with all that I am, to defend what we have built together, and to never give up on the future we are creating." They exchanged simple silver rings that Liam had commissioned from a traveling smith, bands engraved with both human and orc symbols of partnership and commitment. When the priest pronounced them married, Sarah cheered, and Bear barked his approval, and it felt more real and binding than any ceremony in a grand church could have been. Life after the wedding settled into a new normal, deeper and richer than before. Kerra and Liam worked the land together, building their homestead into something truly impressive. They expanded the garden, added more livestock, built a second barn. Traders came regularly now, most of them accepting of the relationship, some even bringing news of other mixed couples who had been inspired by their example. In their 3rd year together, a young orc woman arrived at the homestead, seeking refuge. She had heard stories of Kerra, of an orc who had found peace living with a human, and she wanted that for herself. She was fleeing an arranged marriage to a warrior she despised, looking for any alternative to the life her clan had planned for her. Kerra and Liam took her in without hesitation, giving her shelter and safety while she decided what she wanted to do next. Her name was Zara, and she was young and scared and desperately hopeful. Watching her slowly relax and begin to smile again, Kerra felt a sense of purpose that went beyond her own happiness. More followed over the years. Orcs fleeing violence or rigid clan structures, humans escaping prejudice or looking for a new start. The homestead became a haven for those who did not fit neatly into either world, a place where people could simply be themselves. Kerra and Liam built additional cabins, expanded their operation, created a small community of misfits and dreamers. It was not always easy. There were conflicts, both internal and external. Some people could not let go of old hatreds, and there were occasional attacks or threats, But the community they built proved resilient, defending itself and its values with determination. And slowly, the idea that humans and orcs could live together peacefully spread, taking root in places Kerra and Liam would never see. 5 years after their wedding, on another spring evening, Kerra and Liam sat outside their cabin watching the sunset. The community they had built sprawled around them, lights beginning to glow in windows as evening settled in. Children played in the distance, human and orc both, growing up knowing each other as neighbors and friends rather than enemies. "Do you ever regret it?" Liam asked, his arm around her shoulders. "Leaving your clan, coming here, all of it?" Kerra thought about it seriously, as she always did when he asked. "Sometimes I miss the simplicity of my old life," she admitted. "Everything was clear then. I knew who I was, what I was supposed to do, where I fit. This life is harder, more complicated." "But," Liam prompted, hearing the unspoken word. "But this life is mine," Kerra said firmly. "I chose it, I built it, I fight for it every day, and I have you, which makes every difficulty worth it. So no, I do not regret it, not for a moment." "Good," Liam said, pulling her closer, "because I cannot imagine my life without you in it. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Kerra Yates." She smiled at the sound of her married name, still not quite used to it even after all these years. "You are not so bad yourself, husband." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear, two people from different worlds who had found a way to build something new together. It had not been easy, and it would never be simple, but it was real, and it was theirs. In the distance, someone started playing a fiddle, and voices rose in song, human and orc harmonizing in a way that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. Kerra listened and felt her heart swell with gratitude and love and fierce protective joy. This was what she had been searching for in that frozen swamp, though she had not known it at the time. Not just survival, but a reason to survive. Not just peace, but a purpose worth fighting for. Not just a place to exist, but a home worth defending. And she had found it, in the most unlikely way possible, with a human who had seen her at her lowest and chosen to help anyway. Together, they had built something beautiful and fragile and strong, a bridge between worlds that everyone said could never be crossed. Looking at Liam's face in the fading light, seeing the love and contentment there, Kerra knew with absolute certainty that she would do it all again. Every struggle, every fear, every moment of doubt, all of it had been worth it to arrive at this moment, in this place, with this man. "I love you," she said, the words as true now as they had been the first time she spoke them. I love you too," Liam replied, and kissed her as the stars wheeled overhead, and their community celebrated life and hope and the future they were building together. Years continued to pass, and their small community grew into something more substantial. What had started as a handful of refugees and outcasts became a proper settlement, recognized eventually by both human and orc authorities as neutral ground. It was not easy gaining that recognition, requiring years of negotiation and careful diplomacy. But Kerra and Liam persisted. They raised no children of their own, their different species making that impossible. But they became parents in every way that mattered to the young people who came to them, seeking guidance and safety. Zara grew into a confident young woman who eventually married a human farmer and started her own homestead nearby. Others followed similar paths, building lives that honored both their heritage and their choices. On their 10th anniversary, the settlement held a great celebration. People came from miles around, human and orc both, to honor the couple who had started it all. There were speeches and toasts, music and dancing, food and fellowship that lasted long into the night. An old orc warrior approached Kerra during the festivities, his face scarred from a lifetime of battle. She recognized him after a moment as Grak, who had been one of her clan's most respected fighters. "I never thought I would see you again," he said gruffly. "Word reached us years ago that you had taken up with a human. Most assumed you were dead or enslaved." "As you can see, I am neither," Kerra said carefully, unsure what his presence meant. "I can see that," Grak agreed. "I came to see for myself what you had built here. I had to know if the stories were true." "And now that you have seen?" Grak was quiet for a long moment, his gaze moving over the mixed crowd, the obvious peace and prosperity of the settlement. "I think perhaps you were braver than any of us," he said finally. "We thought you were running away, but you were running toward something, and you found it." He left shortly after, but his visit felt significant. Word of mouth among the orc clans could be a powerful thing, and if someone like Grak returned with stories of what he had seen, it might change minds and hearts. More years passed, and Kerra and Liam grew older together. Liam's hair turned gray, lines appeared around his eyes, his back grew stiff on cold mornings. Kerra aged more slowly, orc lifespan being somewhat longer than human, but she too showed the marks of time and hard work. They faced each new challenge together, weathered each storm as partners. When sickness swept through the settlement, they nursed the afflicted side by side. When drought threatened the crops, they worked with the community to dig new wells and irrigation channels. When tensions between human and orc kingdoms flared into open war again, they worked tirelessly to keep their settlement neutral, a place of peace in a world still dominated by conflict. Through it all, their love remained constant. They still sat outside most evenings to watch the sunset. They still held hands while walking through the fields they had planted together. They still looked at each other with the same wonder and affection that had marked their early days. On a summer evening in their 20th year together, Liam fell ill. It started as a simple cough, nothing concerning, but it progressed rapidly into something more serious. The settlement's healers did everything they could, but sometimes age and illness were simply too much for medicine to overcome. Kerra spent every moment at his side as he weakened, holding his hand, telling him stories, reminding him of all the good they had built together. She was not ready to let him go, would never be ready, but she also knew that death came for everyone eventually. Even the greatest love could not hold it at bay forever. "I am not afraid," Liam told her one night, his voice weak but calm. "I have had a good life, a better life than I ever dreamed possible, and I have had you, which is more than any man deserves." "Do not talk like that," Kerra said, fighting back tears. "You are going to recover. You have to recover." "We both know that is not true," Liam said gently. "But it is all right, my love. I am at peace. I just need to know that you will be all right without me." "I will never be all right without you," Kerra said fiercely. "You are half my soul, Liam. How am I supposed to continue when half of me is gone?" "You continue because there is still work to be done," Liam said. "This settlement, this community we built, it needs you. Those kids who keep showing up looking for hope and safety, they need you. You have so much more to give, Kerra. Do not waste it grieving for me." "I will grieve for you for the rest of my life," Kerra said, tears streaming down her face. "But I will also honor what we built. I promise you that." "That's all I ask," Liam said, and smiled despite his weakness. "I love you, Kerra. From the moment I saw you in that frozen swamp, I loved you. Thank you for letting me be part of your life." "Thank you for saving me," Kerra whispered. "In every way a person can be saved." Liam died peacefully the next morning, Kerra holding his hand as he slipped away. The grief was overwhelming, a physical pain that felt like it might tear her apart, but she endured it because she had promised him she would. She endured it because he was right. There was still work to be done and people who needed her. The settlement mourned with her, honoring the man who had helped create their haven. They buried him on a hill overlooking the homestead, with a simple stone marker that bore both human and orc symbols of love and partnership. Kerra visited the grave every day, talking to him, updating him on the settlement's progress, telling him how much she missed him. Time did not heal the wound of his loss, but it made it more bearable. Kerra threw herself into the settlement's needs, finding purpose in continuing their shared work. She became a leader and elder, someone both humans and orcs could turn to for wisdom and guidance. She helped negotiate peace agreements, mediated disputes, welcomed refugees, and trained the next generation in the art of building bridges between worlds. Years after Liam's death, on what would have been their 30th anniversary, Kerra sat by his grave and spoke to him as she always did. I wish you were here to see what we have become," she said softly. "The settlement is thriving. We have over 200 residents now, nearly equal numbers of humans and orcs. 3 more mixed couples got married this year, and there are children growing up who do not even understand why anyone would think their parents being different species is strange." She paused, looking out over the landscape that had become so familiar. "Your friend Sarah died last month, peacefully in her sleep. She was 94 years old and ornery until the very end. I think you would have liked knowing that she outlived everyone who ever said we would not make it. The wind rustled through the grass, and Kerra imagined she could hear Liam's laugh in it. "I still miss you," she said, "every single day, but I'm doing what I promised. I'm continuing the work. I'm making sure that what we started does not die with you." She stayed there until sunset, as had become her custom on their anniversary, and when she finally rose to leave, she felt a sense of peace. Liam was gone, but what they had built together lived on. Their love had created something that transcended their individual lives, a legacy that would continue long after both of them were dust. Kerra lived for many more years, watching the settlement grow and change, welcoming new generations and helping them understand the history of how it all began. She never remarried or took another partner, content with the memories of what she had shared with Liam. When her own death finally came, many years later, she was an old woman surrounded by the community she had helped build. She died peacefully, with Zara holding her hand and whispering words of love and gratitude. They buried her beside Liam on the hill, their graves marked with matching stones that bore both their names and a simple inscription. They built a bridge between worlds with love. The settlement continued to thrive long after both of them were gone, a living testament to the idea that love could overcome even the deepest divides. Children grew up hearing stories of Liam and Kerra, of how a human man had saved an orc woman from a frozen swamp, and how together they had changed the world. And in quiet moments, when the wind blew just right and the sunset painted the sky in brilliant colors, people swore they could feel the presence of those two souls, still together, still watching over the community they had created from nothing but hope and stubborn determination and love that refused to recognize boundaries. Their story became legend, told and retold, adapted and embellished, but the core truth remained constant. The two people from enemy peoples had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and had chosen love over hatred, partnership over prejudice, hope over despair. And in choosing love, they had proven that a different future was possible. Not easy, not simple, but possible. They had shown that bridges could be built, that wounds could heal, that the cycle of violence and hatred could be broken by those brave enough to try. Their legacy was not just the settlement they founded, though that mattered. It was not just the lives they touched, though those were precious. Their legacy was the simple, radical truth that love transcends all boundaries, all differences, all the things that divide us if we let it. Liam had found Kerra waist-deep in frozen swamp water, too weak to climb out on her own. He had helped her, had saved her life without knowing that she would save his in return in ways that had nothing to do with physical rescue. Together, they had found something worth fighting for, worth building, worth dedicating their lives to. And that, in the end, was everything.